My husband sided with his sister over me until I revealed her secret debt and problem. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old and married to Ethan. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Lily. At first glance, our family seems perfect. Ethan has a steady job while I run a small home business making crafts. We live a quiet life in our suburban home. However, there's one thing that disrupts our peaceful lives. My sister-in-law. Emma is 5 years younger than Ethan and has been treated as the golden child by their parents since birth. She's been spoiled, used to getting her way, and used to people cleaning up after her messes. Ethan has always been close to his sister, perhaps because she's younger, and their parents constantly reminded him to look out for her. This dynamic created a lot of tension in our marriage. At first, I thought Emma's demands were just typical family quirks, but things really started to get tricky when she started invading our personal space. One Friday evening, as I was putting Lily to bed, I heard the doorbell ring. I found Ethan at the door with Emma, who was holding a suitcase, and her 2-year-old. Year-old Max, Ethan's son, was clinging to his mother's leg. "Hey, Sarah, I hope it's okay," Ethan said nervously, glancing between me and Emma. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to hide my annoyance. "Oh, it's nothing serious," Emma said, shrugging and forcing a smile. "Max and I just need a break. From my husband, Jake, things have been tense. I wanted to refuse outright, but Ethan looked at me silently, pleading, just for a few days." He added reluctantly, and I agreed, reminding myself that family was important to Ethan. I had no idea those few days would turn into weeks. Emma showed up. She didn't respect our home or routine. She let Max run wild, broke items around the house without saying sorry, and disrupted our daily lives. When I tried to talk to Ethan about it, he just brushed it off, saying it was just temporary. I thought Sarah was going through a rough time, but as weeks turned into months, I realized that Emma wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. Then one day, while cleaning up the living room, I found a letter tucked beneath the sofa cushion. It was a notice of eviction from Jake's lawyer, informing Emma she had 3 weeks to leave their home. I was really surprised to see that she hadn't left Jake willingly. It seemed like she'd been forced out. I spoke to Ethan that night and asked him if he knew why Emma was there. He said he didn't, but I could tell he was lying. She'd had a fight with Jake, but she didn't mention the eviction. He looked down and didn't say anything. I was torn. Sarah is my sister, and I can't just abandon her. We've been helping her for months, and yet Ethan and she aren't even honest with us. A few days later, Emma made another request. Sarah avoided eye contact and seemed to be avoiding me. "Could you lend me some money?" "Just $5. I needed $1,000 to get back on my feet." Something in me snapped. "Emma, we're not a bank, and you've already cost us so much. Ethan and I need to focus on our family, and I can't keep enabling you." Despite my objections, Ethan gave her the money. I felt betrayed, but I kept quiet, hoping she'd leave soon. The following week, Emma's behavior only got worse. She began criticizing my parenting and suggested that I should give up my business and focus on being a real wife to Ethan. I couldn't take it any longer. I confronted her one night, but Ethan quickly stepped in and tried to calm things down. He said that I was overreacting and that she was just sharing her opinion. He said that we were family. A few days later, I discovered that Emma had been snooping through my personal files. I caught her in my office, holding a letter from my mother, someone I hadn't seen in years. Due to a strained relationship, I took the letter from her hands. I was livid. "Why are you going through my things?" I demanded. "Emma, I was just curious," she replied nonchalantly. "Besides, don't you think it's a bit strange to keep secrets from family?" That was the last straw. I demanded that Emma leave, but once again, Ethan took her side. He told me to take a break and that I was overreacting, feeling isolated and trapped. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days, hoping my absence would make Ethan realize the damage Emma was causing. When I returned, I found the house in disarray. Toys were strewn across the living room, dirty dishes piled up in the sink, and Emma and Max were nowhere to be found. Max was nowhere to be found, and Ethan was sitting on the couch looking exhausted. I asked, "Where's Emma?" "She's gone for now," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "She called me this morning. She's in trouble again. She needs more money." I wanted to scream and ask Ethan why he couldn't see the manipulation, but I held back. Ethan, this has to stop. You're sacrificing our family's peace for hers. He looked away, avoiding my gaze. You don't understand, Sarah. She's my sister. I can't just turn my back on her, but I could feel that something was shifting in our marriage. Emma's presence had driven a wedge between us, and Ethan's loyalty to, I started to wonder what my own importance was in his life. A few weeks later, I saw a series of financial transactions on our bank statements. Thousands of dollars had been transferred to an unknown account. I confronted Ethan, and he admitted that he'd been sending money to Emma in secret, trying to support her until she could stand on her own 2 feet. You didn't think to tell me on your own, I asked, my voice shaking, and I didn't want you to worry. He replied, looking genuinely regretful. The betrayal hit me hard. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about trust, our marriage, and everything I thought we shared. I realized that Ethan's loyalty to his sister might always come before. After months of silence, Jake, Emma's estranged husband, finally reached out to me. We met at a coffee shop where he explained Emma's pattern of using people for money, manipulating family and lying about her circumstances. Jake showed me proof of her gambling debts and her history of failed relationships. Each one, she's a master manipulator, and her recklessness has marred her finances. Sarah, Jake warned me that if I don't put a stop to it, she'll ruin everything you and Ethan have. Armed with this knowledge, I returned home and laid out the evidence in front of Ethan. At first, he was in denial, insisting that Jake was exaggerating. But eventually, he saw the reality. Emma's consistent demands, lies, and disregard for boundaries had become undeniable. Reluctantly, he agreed to cut her off financially. We sat together that night, discussing the toll her behavior had taken on our marriage. I told him how isolated and hurt I'd felt, constantly battling for his attention against someone who showed no respect for our family. The next morning, Ethan called Emma and told her he could no longer support her. She screamed, cursed, and hung up, but we stood our ground for the first time in years. I felt a sense of relief a few weeks later when Emma returned, this time not to demand money, but to plead with us to take her back in. He stayed silent, letting Ethan take the lead on handling the situation. Ethan refused to back down, despite her tears and apologies. When she saw her manipulation tactics fail, she left, furious. From that moment on, our lives gradually returned to normal. Ethan and I began the slow process of rebuilding trust and finding solace in each other once again. It wasn't easy. There were still times when I felt a bit resentful and hurt, but we were moving forward months later. I got a letter from Emma apologizing for the trouble she'd caused. She admitted her mistakes, but also said she'd had no choice because of her circumstances. I read the letter in silence, unsure whether to believe her. I wasn't sure if she was being sincere or just playing the victim. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Ethan and I were stronger now, having faced and overcome this challenge together. We'd set boundaries and were rebuilding trust. As for Emma, I hoped she'd eventually find her own path without dragging others down.